Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I am so excited to be sitting down here today to film this video because this is an idea that I've had percolating in my mind for a minute now, especially as of late, because it seems as though I keep stumbling into some very unpopular opinions. Yes, recently it seems as though I've been going against the grain and it hasn't been intentional. These have just been my genuine opinions. But when you take into consideration my Napoleon review and my complicated thoughts on that film, and then more recently you have my Avatar review where I sung the praises of that live action adaptation, much to many of fans' chagrin, and who can forget my ongoing one-sided beef against Christopher Nolan. So I have quite a few unpopular opinions circling around in this noggin, and since I'm feeling in a zesty mood, I decided to dive into a few of them in a video. So that's what we're going to be diving into today. If that sounds fun to you, then keep on watching. And if you enjoy these more out-of-the-box videos, I have two instructions for you. First of all, give this video a thumbs up if you like it. And second of all, be sure to check out the two playlists on my channel called Movie Chats and TV Chats, because those playlists is where you'll find some more out-of-the-box videos that I've done over the years. I've delved into, the Oscars and interracial relationships most recently. There's also a bunch on streaming, last year's strikes. There's all these different types of topics that I've enjoyed exploring on occasion, and you can go ahead and find those videos in those playlists. And the last bit of homework that you have is one that I always give out to you guys every week, and that is, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Now, without further ado, guys, let's dive into some of my unpopular opinions. Now, I've been keeping an ever-increasing list of unpopular opinions on my phone over the last couple of months, but when I was kind of gathering the unpopular opinions that I wanted to explore in one video, I noticed that there were quite a few that went under the banner of comic book movies. So that's what we're going to be delving into for today's video. And if you guys enjoy this, then maybe it'll become a series that pops up on occasion on the channel. But today, it's mostly going to be focused on my unpopular opinions on the comic book movie genre. And we're starting off with a big one. Ooh, I'm not pulling any punches. We're getting down to the nitty gritty here today, because the first unpopular opinion that I want to dive into, okay, is Deadpool will not save the MCU. Ooh, let's discuss. Okay. Now listen. I've had this thought pretty much since I saw the Deadpool 3 trailer, or more specifically, since I saw people's reactions to the Deadpool 3 trailer, which came out a couple of months back. People were saying the usual stuff of, oh, we're up, oh, we're back. We're back again. If you've been on social media, you know how people react whenever there's a semblance of good, okay? Especially in the Marvel fandom. They'll always be like, oh, we're back. Oh, Marvel's back. Marvel's saved. Deadpool's gonna save Marvel, blah, 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 blah. But when it comes to me, when it comes to my perspective on this, first of all, I didn't even watch the trailer in full, because lately I haven't been watching many trailers. To me, trailers have just been too revealing. They've had too many spoilers. I already know I'm gonna watch the thing. Like, I already know I'm gonna be there opening weekend, so I don't need to be watching no trailers. I don't need to see anything that reveals too much. So there's that. I mostly was just looking at people's reactions to it, which leads me to the second thing, which is that people aren't serious. People are not serious. I hope these studios aren't looking at the comment section under Deadpool 3 thinking that these people are serious, because they're not. In the wise words of Logan Roy, these are not serious people. Marvel fans are no longer serious people, because the idea that Deadpool 3 is going to save Marvel, I have several problems with this. First of all, save Marvel? Save Marvel, even though Marvel has admittedly had several issues when it comes to their recent projects in phases 4 and 5. We know this, we've talked about this many times, and if you want to check out the movie chats playlist, you'll see some of my videos on it. We know that Marvel has struggled with consistency when it comes to its, phases 4 and 5 productions. We get it, okay? But let's not forget that there have been brilliant films to come out of these phases as well. Let's not forget that we got Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Moon Knight, Shang-Chi. Like, we have gotten really good projects out of these last 2 phases. So I am sick and tired. Like, when I tell you, I am sick and tired. Sick to death of people acting like the MCU is dead. The MCU is crap. These fans are not serious, as I said, because you will have a Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 come out and everyone will be like, oh, we're back. Like, Marvel has been saved. James Gunn has saved Marvel, blah, blah, blah. They'll be hyping it up for a week. And then people seem to forget. People get collective amnesia and then they circle back to, oh, Marvel's dead. Oh, everything's bad. Oh, it's so crap. And yes, it doesn't help that there has been increased inconsistency, which we'll talk about in a second, okay? But this idea that Deadpool 3 is gonna save Marvel and blah blah blah, people acting like there hasn't been a single good MCU project in all of 5 years is so disingenuous and so unserious that, like, I'm sick and tired of this narrative. It was fun at first, but now I'm just like, y'all aren't serious. I'm not taking you seriously. So that's number one. That's one reason why Deadpool will not save the MCU, because even if it turns out to be the very best comic book movie, even if it turns out to be perfect, hilarious, great action, brilliant CGI, blah blah blah, it will only get the praise that it deserves for about 1 week, maybe two, before one, some people start turning on it, and two, people promptly forget and start to regurgitate this narrative that Marvel is dead once again. Now, the second reason why I don't think Deadpool 3 is going to save the MCU is because even if Deadpool 3 ends up being, again, the best comic book movie ever, great action, comedy, Ryan Reynolds saves the day temporarily, that still isn't addressing the plethora of issues that are facing Marvel Studios both on and off screen. That still doesn't address the roots of the problem. Again, we've seen many occasions where filmmakers have been able to wade through the weeds that has become Marvel Studios in order to produce excellence, like Destin Daniel Cretton or Ryan Coogler or James Gunn. Like, they were able to deliver despite the plethora of issues. But that's not to say that those issues aren't still there, because they very much are, as we see from the results of people who weren't able to deliver. So even if Deadpool 3 ends up being really, really great, I don't think it's enough for it to save the MCU, because the MCU is currently facing a bunch of problems both on and off screen that need more than just a big hit to save them from. But yeah, all in all, I don't think Deadpool 3 is going to save the MCU, even if it does turn out to be a massive hit, even if it makes $1 billion at the box office, which it's predicted to make. But I actually think it might be a bit more of a struggle than people think. $1 billion these days is hard to come by, especially in this post-pandemic era. And even though we're all very excited to see the return of Fox's X-Men for some reason, even though they're much maligned, but again, people aren't serious and have short-term memory loss. So for some reason, people are excited to see Fox's X-Men again, despite their many misses throughout the franchise. But even with all of that hype, I think Deadpool 3 reaching $1 billion worldwide might be a bit more of a hurdle than people think it is, because of the current declining movie market, and that's even setting aside the superhero fatigue that many people claim to have, although apparently you don't have superhero fatigue when it comes to Deadpool. Okay, duly noted. But yeah, Deadpool might be a big hit on its own, but I don't think it's enough to save the franchise. There's just too many problems. There's too much going on, and I think ultimately the only way that we'll know if the franchise has been saved is if we look in the long term, a few years from now, at the successive projects that come out after Deadpool, because otherwise Deadpool will end up just being a one-hit wonder amongst a bunch of disappointments. Okay, so next up, sticking to the topic of recent Fox acquisitions, we have the Fantastic Four, and my unpopular opinion about the Fantastic Four is that I don't care about I do not care about the Fantastic Four. I don't care about Marvel's first family. No, I don't. And I'll tell you why. First of all, I think it's genuinely baffling that so many people seem to be excited to see yet another live action iteration of the Fantastic Four when considering how poorly the other two iterations went. I mean, I'll admit, I found some enjoyment in the first Fantastic Four franchise. Like, I thought it was fun. I thought Chris Evans was well cast as Johnny Storm, and like the original cast was cute. But those films weren't great. Those films weren't amazing, but they were passable, especially the first or second one. I can't remember. I can't remember which one was better, but one of them was better than the other, and that was decent at best. But then we get into the 2015 remake, Fantastic, and that's where you've completely lost me, actually. Like, that's where you completely lost me, I'm afraid. I would be hard-pressed to find a single redeeming quality of that second iteration of Marvel's first family, especially the second half of that film. Please. I was just appalled by that film. That whole thing was just tragic, honestly. When you consider the director just losing hope, the cast losing hope, people racially abusing Michael B. Jordan. Get out of here, man. So that's number one. The idea that people would be like, oh, I'm so excited to see yet another iteration of the Fantastic Four. Are you? Because the other two versions went so well. This isn't even like the Spider-Man franchises where you've consistently had at least one bright spot in each iteration of the character. This isn't even like that. In all of the live action versions of the Fantastic Four, you've had problems. Like, you've had problems on problems. They've been ridiculous throughout. And people, again, having this collective amnesia and getting excited over yet another iteration of Marvel's first family is genuinely baffling to me. Because for me, it's like, fool me once, fool me twice. The third time, are we still doing this? Now, the second reason why I don't care about the Fantastic Four, even if they are coming to the MCU, is because they're not coming into the MCU that I wanted them to come into. I want you guys to rewind back a few years ago when we first heard that Disney was going to be purchasing Fox, and many of us naive Marvel fans were only focusing on the implications for the franchise and not for the industry at large, but that's a whole different other discussion. But of course, many of us were excited to see what Kevin Feige would do with some of the toys that he got to play with from Fox, like the X-Men and Fantastic Four. But I think it's important to note that when we were getting all excited over the prospects and possibilities of having the Fantastic Four and the X-Men in the MCU, we were still head deep in phases 2 and 3 of the MCU. Like, we were looking at the Infinity War saga of the MCU, which was the peak of not just comic book movie making, but franchise movie making overall. But that time, that era, unfortunately has passed, and the MCU that we have today is distinctly different to the one that we were well acquainted with like 5-10 years ago. And so to me, even if I cared about the Fantastic Four, which I don't, okay, after seeing the other live action iterations, even if I did care, I wouldn't even be as excited to see them in this version of the MCU, the post-Endgame version that has been, you know, full of inconsistencies and is lacking a key central focus to get us excited about the world, about the universe. Again, as someone who was never really into the Fantastic Four, the only reason why I was at least somewhat interested to see this group in the MCU was because I thought we would get some interactions with some of our favorite Marvel characters. But now with this new version of the MCU, there's like less to get excited about. It's not gonna be like Infinity War where we saw Tony Stark talking to Peter Quill for the first time. Like, the link-ups just aren't gonna be the same. They're not gonna be the same. Again, I think the MCU has larger problems at this point. They need to work on many things, but one of the many things is building up these characters so that we can get reinvested in them and they can become our faves once again. And only at that point, when we start to get invested in the characters again and in the world, can we start to get really excited about seeing these formerly X-Men characters interacting with the MCU proper characters for the first time. Unless that groundwork is done and done sometime soon, the clock is ticking, okay? You're not really gonna get a repeat of the excitement that we felt when Tony Stark was talking to Peter Quill or Doctor Strange was hanging out with Thor. Like, it's just not gonna happen. And also, aside from that, to make matters even worse, for me personally, in my opinion, okay, the Fantastic Four apparently are gonna be introduced in their own little pocket universe, like their own little corner of the multiverse. But anywho, they're going to be introduced in their own little corner of the MCU, which to me kind of defeats the purpose of getting excited about them coming into the MCU proper, no? Like, am I the only one who's like, what? Wasn't the whole point of us getting excited to see Disney buy back Fox so that we could get the Fantastic Four and the Avengers kind of fighting together? Like, wasn't that the whole purpose? But no, instead they're going to be introduced in the universe in their own little solo joint, which, again, considering the track record of Fantastic Four live action projects, I'm sorry, but I don't have the same excitement that you guys do. And finally, the last reason why I'm not particularly excited about the Fantastic Four joining the MCU is because, in my opinion, we have already gotten the best version of the Fantastic Four in the form of the Incredibles. Yes, Brad Bird may have been inspired by Marvel's first family when he created the Incredibles, but he should rest easy because he's already created the best on-screen version of the Fantastic Four that will ever come to be. So for me, I'm not even impressed. Like, I don't even care, because as cute as the, you know, poster that we got for Valentine's Day of the new Fantastic Four cast was, in my mind, they're never gonna live up to the Parr family. Like, I'm sorry, but what Brad Bird was able to achieve with the medium of animation was nothing short of incredible. And I just don't see the live action iteration of this family, this damn family, working out half as well as the animated film did. But if you guys want to get excited over the third live action iteration of Marvel's first family, then you go on right ahead. Don't let me stop you. So next up, to break things up a little bit, we're going to run through some Spitfire unpopular opinions that I have. We're not going to take too much time explaining them because these are just facts, honestly. These are just gospel, so we don't even need to get into the nitty-gritty details. First of all, some of you guys will already know this one. The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is overrated as hell. The Dark Knight is overrated as hell, and as a Batman movie, it's particularly overrated. I think at the very least, even the most fervent The Dark Knight fan will admit that it works better as a Joker movie than it does a Batman movie, so there's that. But overall, it's just overrated. It's been, what, like 15, 20, 65 years since that film came out. If you're still saying that's the best comic book movie ever made, then you clearly haven't watched a comic book movie in like 20 years. Like, I'm so sorry, sis, but there's been like billions that have come out since, and like some of them have superseded The Dark Knight. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Next unpopular opinion is probably going to upset the same group of people, but I don't know what to tell you. It's just like the gospel. It's just facts. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies are also grossly overrated. And they haven't aged well. I actually caught up on all of the live action Spider-Man films a couple of years ago when I did my Spider-Man movies ranking video, which you can check out if you're interested. But in that video, I did actually admit that the Sam Raimi films were a touch better than I thought they would be, considering the clips and stuff that I had seen over the years. But considering the standing and reputation that they have in comic book movie history, I expected much, much better. And considering the, again, comic book movie films that we have gotten since then, since that era, I'm sorry, but I'm not looking at this franchise with rose-tinted glasses the way that some of y'all are. So I'm gonna call it as it is and say that it's overrated as hell. Overrated as hell. And having 1.5 good movies in a trilogy is just not enough for me to say that it's the best Spider-Man trilogy of all time. Like, that clearly is not. Another quick fire unpopular opinion that I have that is actually facts and is actually gospel is, and this might trigger some of you, so if you feel triggered by my previous 2 opinions, then maybe cover your ears for this one, because I don't know how you might react. Although these days this opinion isn't even that unpopular anymore, but disclaimer just in case. Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder is a bad director. Listen, like, I don't know what to tell you. Zack Snyder swore up and down that the reason why he wasn't able to deliver on the Snyderverse, the DC films, is because of studio interference, is because of this, is because of that. And to be fair, the man has actually been through a lot. He suffered great tragedy during this time in his career. So we're not discussing that. We're putting that to the side here. But I'm just talking about professionally and creatively when it came to his films. He and his fans made all kinds of excuses for him and his inability to deliver a good comic book movie in the peak of the comic book movie craze. But more recently, Zack Snyder was inexplicably given not just a second, but a third chance by Netflix to deliver a good film, like one good film. One good film that he could put his name to in the form of Rebel Moon, his version of Star Wars. And that just imploded. Like, that absolutely collapsed. This thing that was supposed to be the benchmark for a whole new franchise. Like I said, this was supposed to be Zack Snyder's Star Wars, the Star Wars that Disney refused to make because Disney is yet another evil studio who has terrible taste, and Zack Snyder is the underdog. You know, he has a goal, he has a vision, he's a visionary director and deserves to have his movies be made the way that he sees them. And so he had to go to Netflix, and Netflix gave him a shit ton of money to make this happen, only for him to deliver a turd, only for him to deliver another ball of crap. And like, at this point, we just have to admit, we just have to call it as it is and say that Zack Snyder is not a good director. He may have had a couple of good ones in him, okay? Like Watchmen was pretty good, especially the first half, although that was grossly superseded by the HBO limited series. So honestly, I can't even call that a solid win. But some people like 300, I guess, and Man of Steel was actually decent. Like I quite enjoyed Man of Steel. But since then, what has my man done? Nothing, like nothing but trouble and turmoil. So I think it's time for Hollywood to just take a break on Zack Snyder, because the man is not good. Like I used to say that he was all style and no substance, but he even lost that when it came to Rebel Moon and decided instead to resort to hijacking the last 50 years of filmmaking. So no, I'm sorry, but no more excuses for Zack Snyder. He's not a good director. He's lost the juice if he ever had it in the first place. And also, I've said this before, but I must reiterate again, because it's been a while. It's been a while since I talked about Zack Snyder because he's so irrelevant. But the idea of having a director who is incapable of making one cut, of making one definitive version of a film is just baffling to me. And the idea that people would continue again to reward this man, to give him tons of money to make more films, to actualize his vision, again, is just as baffling, especially considering some other filmmakers who aren't granted such a privilege. But the fact that before Rebel Moon even came out, he was already touting an alternative cut, a director's cut, a Snyder cut version of the film that was apparently more adult and more edgy or whatever. The fact that this was already set in motion before the film even came out is just absurd. And I think Zack Snyder has been high off of his own supply for way too long. He has lost the sense of reality and reasonableness, and for some reason the industry has continued to reward this behavior. But it's high time that he finally pays for his sins, because he is just a crappy director in my opinion. Okay, so the Zack Snyder point went on for a little bit longer than I thought it would. But next up on the list of unpopular opinions, we have a little point about actors. I talked about directors, but now let's move on to the actors. Give them a little bit of that heat, okay? Because my next unpopular opinion is, I don't like it when actors bash their own films during the press tours. And this, of course, relates to the recent Madame Web press tour, where that seemed to be Dakota Johnson's primary tactic to distance herself as far as possible from Madame Web before it even reached cinemas, because she, of course, could smell the stink. She could smell the stink from a mile away. She knew it was probably going to be crap and flop. So Dakota Johnson was looking out for Dakota Johnson. She wanted to come out of it on top despite the disaster and calamity. So she began to distance herself before the film even hit big screens. But even though people were praising her on social media, calling her a relatable girly, yes queen, like yes queen, shit on your own film, I personally was never one of those people. I briefly discussed this in my Madam Web review. I really don't like it when actors shit on their own films, especially when the film has yet to come out, especially when you're still technically trying to promote it. Because to me, we're not on the same side of the joke. Like, to me, these actors are in a different class. They're the ones that were a part of the project. They're the ones that signed the contracts, okay? They put on the suits, they said their lines, and they did their thing. They're the ones telling the joke. They're in on the joke itself, but the joke is on me, okay? Because I am the one who has to get up out of my house and go to the cinema, pay full price to see this film, even though it is crap, okay? I am the one who has to spend 2 hours in a dark room surrounded by strangers, or maybe I'm there on my own because none of these other strangers wanted to come see this junk. I'm the one that has to suffer the consequences of their actions. So we're not on the same side here, girly. Like, I'm happy to have a kiki, ha ha, he he with my friends or with you guys about how crappy a film is. But these actors getting paid millions and trillions for playing a role in these films, yeah, they're not my besties in that way. But this might not be as much of an unpopular opinion as I thought it was, because I do remember a couple of you guys agreeing with me in the comment section of my Madam Web review, and one of you guys even used the word smugness, which I completely agree with. Like, that smugness that some actors have when they're bashing their own films, especially when they're, you know, upcoming, it really doesn't sit well with me. So I've never been a fan of that attitude. And speaking of attitude, another reason why this PR strategy has never sit right with me is because actors are supposed to be the spokespeople for their films. We're seeing the press tours. Yes, we tend to see, you know, the actors, maybe the directors and the writers, but in reality, they are representing a whole company, a whole group of people who have worked on that production. And many of these people are underpaid, overworked, suffering. I mean, we remember those strikes from last year. There are loads of people who aren't half as privileged as these named actors working on these productions. But it's on the actors to sell that production. They are the faces of the project. And so they're supposed to use their popularity and reputation and fans' parasocial relationships with them in order to promote that project as best as they can. And so when some of these actors take the tactic of trying to distance themselves from a bomb, okay, from an upcoming bomb, it doesn't sit right with me, because it's like they're clearly just looking out for themselves. They're clearly looking out for number one and don't give a shit about everyone else that worked on that production. I think it's so much more gracious and so much more kind and actually relatable when an actor not necessarily lies through their teeth, but, you know, focuses on the positive. And even if they do want to distance themselves from a project, they can at the very least highlight the positive contributions of others and say that they worked with a brilliant crew, you know, so many talented people, and there may have been difficulties along the way, but they all pulled together like a family and made it work. Like, you know, you can have that approach instead of just bashing it and be like, oh yeah, this is crap, I haven't seen it, I'm never gonna watch it, I'm never gonna do a comic book movie ever again, I only did this for the money, I only did this to get paid, I only did this because I have free kids. That is just so annoying and unattractive to me, and I know that people on twitter.com like go crazy for it each and every time, but to me it's just really off-putting. Essentially what it comes down to it is that I would much rather see these actors at least put on a show of being grateful for the incredibly privileged position that they're in to be big stars in these movie franchises, as opposed to going down the snooty, selfish route of trying to seem like they're better than the film that they signed the contract to be in. And finally, the final unpopular opinion that we're going to be discussing in today's video may not be that unpopular after all, but in my opinion, I think that scoopers are ruining these comic book movie fandoms. I think the scooping business has gotten way out of hand, and I think that scoopers who are always desperate to get the biggest scoops, the biggest lowdowns and spoilers of upcoming comic book movie projects are ruining the fandom and the comic book movie experience for many of us fans, particularly the fans, because general audiences, you know, they're dipping in and out out of these comic book movies, depending on if they're interested in the characters or the project or the reviews. You know, general audiences have been a bit more timid in general because of that superhero fatigue. It's a little bit of a different situation with general audiences because they were never really following every single update, every single trailer, TV spot, you know, toy release. Like, they weren't following all of that anyways. They were just going off of good word of mouth and reviews and hype. So they're in a different box. I think that the Scoop Game has started to ruin things specifically for fans because we are the ones who are following all of the updates and seeing all of the set photos and TV spots and toy releases. And so when you are excited and enthusiastic about your favorite comic book movie franchise and you start to follow all of that, it can become a little bit tiring and it can feel like you've already seen 90% of the film before you even walk into the cinema. This is made 10 times worse when scoopers will literally get their grubby little hands on these HD photos of massive spoilers on sets of upcoming comic book movies. And this has of course plagued Deadpool 3, so much so that Ryan Reynolds actually had to come out and say something about it. But I think in general, the Scoop Game has had a detrimental effect on the fandom, especially on social media. So for me personally, as I mentioned before, I don't even watch full trailers anymore because I find them to be spoiler heavy on their own. But I also try to steer clear of, you know, any social media posts regarding upcoming projects because I don't want to know everything that happens, you know, in an upcoming comic book movie before it's even released. So I want to go in with at least some surprise and some mystery so that I can enjoy the film. And I felt this way for a long time, in fact, pretty much 10 years since Avengers Age of Ultron came out. I would say the lead up to Avengers Age of Ultron was the one that I had the most fervent hype for, and that was where I was watching all of the trailers a million times. That was where I was watching all of the TV spots. I was looking at all of the, you know, trailer breakdown videos on YouTube and, you know, the behind the scenes set photos, everything. When it came to Avengers Age of Ultron, my excitement level was like over the moon because this was the first Avengers movie that I would be seeing in cinemas. So I was like frothing at the mouth. But then I remember, you know, sitting down to watch the film itself, that a part of me felt a little bit disappointed, not by the quality of the film, but because I'd already seen so much of it before I'd even gone into the theatre. So yeah, this might be an unpopular opinion. I know that people love knowing every single detail about these upcoming comic book movie projects. Some people even like spoilers, like they like being spoiled and everything because they know that they're gonna have the same amount of enjoyment off of the project when they finally see it. So like, people are different. But for me personally, the competitiveness of the Scoop Game has started to have a detrimental effect on the fandoms overall because these scoopers are fighting to the death, okay, to get the juiciest scoops that they can. Meanwhile, they're just ruining things for a lot of us. They're showing way too much and it's no longer enjoyable. It's no longer fun. But that's it from me, guys. Now that I told you guys some of my unpopular opinions, especially regarding comic book movies, it's time for you guys to let me know what your unpopular opinions are and also what you thought of mine down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch your videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.